Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the new album from Ronnie Dunn, Peace, Love, and Country Music. My very first concert was a Brooks and Dunn concert. I honestly don't remember much of it. I remember Lone Star opened for them and did a pretty solid job actually, and that Brooks and Dunn really had a lot of flashy fireworks in their show, but the duo, they did manage to leave a pretty big impression upon me growing up. When I was listening to a lot of 90s country, I listened to a lot of Brooks and Dunn, and looking back on them now, I'm not surprised at all why they did so well. Kix Brooks had the smoother tones to bring in a more pop audience, and Ronnie Dunn had the more rough, more country vocals to appeal to mainstream country fans and neo-traditional country fans of that time. That said, as much as they made some really great line dancing music, they were never really critical darlings, mostly because they weren't exactly deep songwriters before they subsumed the Nashville songwriting machine that cranked them out hits. And as much as I like the band for making some 90s country standards, you didn't go to listen to Brooks and Dunn for depth in mainstream country. You had Alan Jackson and George Strait and other artists for that. And thus, when Brooks and Dunn split up after 2 decades of music, I'll admit I wasn't all that phased. What did interest me was Ronnie Dunn's solo career, which he kicked off in 2011 with a self-titled album, and is most remembered by me with Cost of Living, a brutally tragic song about the continued recession across the United States, especially in rural states and small towns. It was a daring move, for a second single especially, and what makes the song so powerful is that it doesn't present a solution or a message that it's all going to be okay. That song, combined with some of the more vitriolic remarks against the evolving state of modern country that Ronnie Dunn has made, they had me curious about his newest album, albeit with a certain degree of caution. After all, I appreciate steps in a more mature or deep direction in country music, but I'm also aware such comments can be used to placate the country music press concerning authenticity, and that can shunt them off from examining your material in a more deeper light. So, on that note, I checked out his second album. Does he deliver here? Oh boy, this is one of the tricky ones, because make no mistake, Ronnie Dunn's Peace, Love, and Country Music is a boldly conceived effort with many highlights and more experimentation than you would typically see in mainstream or neo-traditional country music. The closest analog I would make actually to this year is Eric Church's album The Outsiders, and just like that album, I get the depressing feeling that it works a lot better in pieces than it does as a whole. And look, while I like Ronnie Dunn's second solo album, I actually like it more than Eric Church's Trainwreck, it suffers from many of the same problems that made it hard for me to really come up here and recommend. So okay, let's start with Ronnie Dunn himself, who both as a songwriter and as a performer can be defined by 2 words: direct and broad. Now, to be blunt, Ronnie Dunn works best in bold, stark songs where he can just let his rich, textured voice carry all the emotional resonance. And on the better songs of the album, he does just that. He's not subtle by any stretch of the mind in his delivery, which does mean a few songs on this album don't work as well as they could. We'll get to that. But you know what? When he goes for broke, he's an effective and consistent presence across a number of his songs, and he's passionate. I like that. I just wish that the rest of this album had any sense of consistency or anything close to his, because the production quality on this record is all over the place. For a few songs, you get snippets of beautifully textured and steel guitar-filled neo-traditional country music, with Dunn's Baptist roots really shining through in the always welcome organ. These songs are the most familiar and consistently strong tracks on the album, but at the same time, the melodies are not really interesting enough to really rise beyond just being good songs, not really great songs. Where things get more interesting are where Ronnie Dunn takes steps towards a harsher, grimier, southern rock direction, with crunchier guitars, thicker distortion, and borderline metal presentation. Hell, there are more harsher and more textured guitar tones on this album than I've heard on some metal albums this year, which is kind of hilarious. This leads to one of 2 highlights on this album for me in Thou Shalt Not, a song that embraces a southern gothic tone with a sleazy, lo-fi electric guitar, hollow percussion, and ominously sampled booming bass backing vocals with phenomenal production. I really dug it on this track. On the other hand, you get songs like Cowgirls Rock and Roll and Country This, which might have some meaty guitar guitar presence and that have some real explosive power, but they add more electronic elements, chintzy backing vocals, and only amp up the meat-headed sensibility of the songs, which really doesn't make them come across as attractive. I have to admit, it's really the electronic elements that hamper the other element of experimentation, and that's Ronnie Dunn's steps towards mainstream country music, with pluckier guitars and more airy, sweeping production. But the last thing Ronnie Dunn needs is drum machines and auto-tune, as they completely feel incredibly disingenuous to his defiantly organic vocals. It makes songs like Kiss You There and Let's Get the Beer Joint Rockin' stand out as just bad checklist bro country tracks. It's very telling that the best of the mainstream-inspired country songs on this album is Cadillac Bound, because mostly it features the cleanest production, and most could probably be slotted under a lot of the same stuff that Toby Keith did on his last album. Now, granted, that song also works because it's a straightforward, powerful love song in the vein of Born to Run, and this takes us to lyrics and themes. Now, as I've said, Ronnie Dunn is straightforward and direct, so songs like this, the opener, Grown Damn Man, the surprisingly sincere and well-executed You Should See You Now, Heart Letting Go, and the title track, they're decidedly country songwriting. It works just fine. Hell, Thou Shalt Not plays up the religious outlaw angle in the lyrics and the very straightforward presentation. It works really well. I dug it. Unfortunately, there are songs on this record that require a little bit more nuance to effectively pull off. Take I Wish I Still Smoked, a solid neo-traditional country ballad in the vein of Alan Jackson's Everything I Love, where Ronnie Dunn reminisces about his adventurous days filled with bad habits. Okay, I can appreciate that. And then he straightforward tells us in the chorus why he misses them, why he misses that adventurous spirit, and he lays out his rationale very plainly. You know what, he didn't have to do that. We got the point. And then take the song Romeo and Juliet, which has a couple good lyrics, but operates on the premise that he wants the same feelings of young love like Romeo and Juliet. A pair of lovers whose naivete and heady infatuation got them killed. Yeah, not the best comparison here. Or take the song You Don't Know Me, which with the organ accompaniment might just be the most melodramatic song about the friend zone that I've ever heard. And I'll say this, it's far from flattering. Or take the song Country This, which seems to be trying to condemn the city country establishment for co-opting the rural brand, but then he delivers one of the most processed and flatly performed country rock tracks that could have been just churned out by the very same country establishment. Now this points to the biggest issue on this record. For as much as Ronnie Dunn has condemned the commercialization of country music, his hypocrisy is pretty obvious when he has songs on this album that seem tailor-made for mainstream radio, and especially when they're his lead-off singles. And it gets worse when you have songs on this album when, like, they still play country music in Texas. And look, on its own, the song works. And I can even empathize with, as my current favorite country music record from this year is Texas Country. But when you condemn the Nashville songwriting machine while having songs that play in the exact same formula, or you condemn metal tones in country music while having some of the most defiantly hard and textured edges in your music, the song, it feels hypocritical. It loses all of its weight. And what's worse about it all is that I really like the southern rock and metal edges to this album. They had texture, and they had meat, and they showed a sign of Ronnie Dunn's music that you don't often see in mainstream modern country music. So why condemn the elements on your album that made your music stand out? It just doesn't work here. Look, this album is a complete mess. That's not without merit, but really doesn't work as a whole. I can accept that Ronnie Dunn put this together on his own independent label and did it all outside of the country music establishment, which I respect. Let me stress this. And it does yield some interesting and pretty damn good material. But at the same time, there's no self-awareness here to the songwriting, and that really hurts the overall feel of this album. So you know what? I'm giving it a 6 out of 10, and because there are elements that stand out well here, but not enough to really elevate this record into something that's special. If you're interested in hearing a more experimental country record with a unique flavor from an old pro in the business, you should check out Peace, Love, and Country Music by Ronnie Dunn. You know what? It doesn't all work, but the parts that do, they are worth a listen. So check it out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If there's anything I may be able to do to improve my presentation, or if there's any other albums coming out this year that you'd like me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. So until then, I'm Mark. I'll see you next time.